The emergency session alarm echoed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council headquarters on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Zethrix of the Vorthan Republic clutched his communication tablet with trembling tentacles as he rushed toward the Grand Chamber. The message he'd received 30 minutes ago still burned in his mind like acid. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from all Galactic Council treaties, agreements, and cooperative ventures. We thank you for the experience and wish you well in your future endeavors. The Sol System borders are now closed to all non-human traffic. The massive doors to the Council chamber hissed open, revealing chaos unlike anything Zethrix had witnessed in his 2 centuries of diplomatic service. Representatives from over 400 species filled the circular amphitheater, their voices creating a cacophony of panic in dozens of languages. The air recyclers struggled to process the mixture of atmospheric requirements, creating an unpleasant haze that matched the mood perfectly. High Chancellor Morvek, a towering Krellian whose species had founded the Council 8,000 years ago, stood at the central podium. His usually pristine blue scales were dulled with stress hormones, and his 4 eyes darted nervously across the assembly. "Order! Order!" Morvek's voice boomed through the chamber's acoustic amplifiers. "We must address this situation with calm deliberation." "Calm," shrieked Representative Thilla from the insectoid Chitari Collective. Her mandibles clicked furiously as she spoke. "Do you understand what the humans have just done? They've cut off our primary supply of medical nanobots. My colonies are facing a plague outbreak, and human nanobots were our only hope of containing it." The chamber erupted in agreement. Zethrix watched in horror as delegate after delegate began listing their dependencies on human technology and services. The Valonian trade coordinator was practically weeping crystalline tears as she explained how human cargo ships handled 60% of all intersystem freight. The Saurian military attaché looked physically ill as he described their reliance on human tactical advisors and advanced weapon systems. "This is preposterous," declared General Korthak of the Hegemony War Council. The massive, armor-plated warrior slammed his fist on his delegation's table, cracking the reinforced metal. "Humans have been part of the Council for barely 3 centuries. How did we become so dependent on these newcomers?" Ambassador Velix from the ancient Ethereal Collective, one of the oldest species in the galaxy, slowly rose from her meditation position. Her translucent form shimmered as she spoke in her haunting melodic voice. "Perhaps, General, the question is not how we became dependent, but why we failed to recognize their value until now." The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by an aide rushing into the chamber. The young Orion male's face was pale as he whispered something urgent to Chancellor Morvek. The color drained completely from Morvek's scales. "What is it?" demanded Representative Thilla. "The suspense is killing me faster than this plague will." Morvek's voice cracked as he read from the tablet. "The human ambassador Sarah Chen has left a detailed breakdown of all systems, services, and technologies that will be affected by their withdrawal. The list is extensive." He began reading, his voice growing smaller with each item. "Discontinuation of human-operated faster-than-light communication networks across 17 sectors. Immediate recall of all human medical personnel from council hospitals. Suspension of human agricultural technology sharing programs. Termination of human-led peacekeeping missions in 43 disputed systems. Cessation of human research collaboration in quantum physics, biological sciences, and temporal mechanics." The list continued for 20 agonizing minutes. By the time Morvek finished, the chamber was dead silent except for the mechanical hum of life support systems. "There must be something we can do," whispered Trade Commissioner Glax, a normally boisterous Bulgarian whose voice had been reduced to barely a wheeze. "We could offer them anything. Technology, resources, territory." "They don't want our technology," said a bitter voice from the back of the chamber. All heads turned to see Senior Analyst Kin, a rarely speaking member of the Council's Intelligence Division. For the past year, I've been monitoring human research output. They've been developing alternatives to everything they've shared with us. Better alternatives. The revelation hit the assembly like a physical blow. Zethrix felt his stomach acids churning as the implications became clear. The humans hadn't left impulsively. This was planned, calculated, and utterly devastating. But why? The question came from dozens of voices simultaneously. Chancellor Morvek looked down at his tablet again, his expression growing even more troubled. Ambassador Chen included a personal message. She says, and I quote, "For 3 centuries, humanity has offered friendship, cooperation, and assistance to the Council. In return, we've been treated as junior partners, subjected to constant suspicion, and excluded from major decisions affecting our own species. We've watched as our innovations were credited to others, our warnings ignored, and our people discriminated against in Council institutions. We're tired of being taken for granted." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Zethrix found himself examining his own memory, and what he discovered there made him deeply uncomfortable. How many times had he dismissed human proposals as naive? How often had he rolled his eyes at their optimistic suggestions? When was the last time he'd actually listened to a human perspective without prejudgment? "Surely this is just a negotiating tactic," suggested Economic Coordinator Brath, though his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. "Humans are emotional creatures. They'll calm down and return to the table soon enough." "No," said Analyst Kin flatly. "My sources in human space suggest this decision has majority support across all human colonies and governments. They've been planning this withdrawal for months, possibly years. They're not coming back." The chamber fell into stunned silence again. The magnitude of their situation was beginning to sink in. The humans weren't just leaving. They were taking with them the foundation upon which modern galactic civilization had been built, often without anyone realizing how crucial that foundation had become. Representative Thilla was the first to break the silence, her voice now barely a whisper. "My people are going to die, aren't they? Without human medical technology?" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Similar calculations were being made across the chamber as delegates realized the true scope of their dependency. Trade routes would collapse. Research projects would stagnate. Conflicts would escalate without human mediators. The galaxy's golden age of cooperation and prosperity was ending, and it had taken humanity's departure for them to realize that humans had been the architects of that golden age all along. Chancellor Morvek set down his tablet and looked out at the assembled representatives. For the first time in his long career, he had no idea what to say. The Council had just lost the most valuable members in its history, and they'd driven them away through sheer arrogance and neglect. "Emergency session is hereby called," he said quietly. "We need to discuss immediate damage control measures." But as the delegates began their panicked discussions, one terrible truth was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. There might not be any way to control this damage. The humans were gone, and the Council was about to learn exactly how much they'd depended on the species they'd never truly respected. The crisis became real with devastating speed. Within 72 hours of humanity's withdrawal, the Galactic Council's carefully maintained civilization began showing cracks that quickly became chasms. Dr. Kellick stumbled through the corridors of Andromeda General Hospital, the Council's premier medical facility. Her 4 arms juggled multiple data tablets as she tried to coordinate the chaos that had erupted since the human medical staff disappeared. The hospital, which had operated smoothly for decades, was now a maze of confusion and growing desperation. "Doctor!" called Nurse Prathan, his crystalline form flickering with stress patterns. "The nanobotic surgery suite is completely offline. We have 17 critical patients who need immediate attention, but none of our staff know how to operate the human-designed equipment. Dr. Kellix closed her eyes and tried to center herself. As chief medical officer, she'd overseen thousands of procedures, but she was realizing with growing horror that nearly every advanced piece of equipment in the hospital relied on human technology or human-trained operators. "What about the technical manuals?" she asked desperately. "The humans took them all," Prathan replied. "Every database, every training program, every operational guide. They even wiped the backup servers before they left." In the surgical bay, Dr. Vorth was attempting to perform a delicate neural procedure on a Catherian diplomat using traditional tools. Without the precision nanobots that human medicine had perfected, the surgery that should have taken 2 hours was stretching into its 8th hour. The patient's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly. "I can't do this," Dr. Vorth whispered to his assistant. "Without the nanobots, I'm operating blind. This patient is going to die and there's nothing I can do about it." Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Industrial Coordinator Thane watched helplessly as his operation ground to a halt. The human-designed extraction equipment had been running perfectly for over a century, but when a crucial component failed, Thane discovered that no one on his staff understood how to repair it. "The efficiency ratings on this machinery are impossible," Chief Engineer Dralix reported, his frustration evident. "Our best engineers estimate the human extractors operate at 300% of what our current technology should allow. We have no idea how they achieved these results." Thane stared at the silent machines that had made his mining operation the most profitable in the sector. "How long until we can get them running again?" "Sir," Dralix said quietly, "we might never get them running again. The technology is so far beyond our current understanding that we can't even begin to reverse engineer it. It would take our scientists decades just to understand the basic principles. The economic implications were staggering. Mining output across council space had dropped by 60% overnight. Agricultural worlds reported similar devastating losses as human-designed terraforming systems failed without proper maintenance. Transportation networks collapsed as human-operated cargo ships disappeared, leaving goods stranded across thousands of light years. On the diplomatic front, the situation was equally catastrophic. The Saurian-Valonian conflict, which had been carefully managed by human mediators for 30 years, exploded into open warfare within days of the withdrawal. Without human peacekeepers to maintain the delicate ceasefire agreements, both sides had immediately reverted to their ancient territorial disputes. Ambassador Gorath of the Saurian Empire found himself in an impossible position as he tried to coordinate his species' military response without human tactical advisors. The humans had spent decades training Saurian forces in advanced warfare techniques, but their departure revealed how dependent his people had become on human strategic thinking. "Our battle simulations are failing consistently," reported General Sisk, his scaled features tight with worry. "We've been using human-designed tactical algorithms for so long that our own strategic capabilities have atrophied. We're fighting like primitives compared to what we could do with human support." Meanwhile, in the Council's research facilities, the crisis was reaching apocalyptic proportions. Dr. Zen Hai, the galaxy's leading quantum physicist, stood in her laboratory surrounded by equipment she no longer understood. For 50 years, she'd worked alongside human scientists, building on their theories and techniques. Now, faced with machines that incorporated human quantum mechanics breakthroughs, she realized she'd been little more than an advanced technician. "The quantum resonance chamber is beyond our comprehension," she admitted to her research team. "The humans designed it using principles we haven't even discovered yet. Without their guidance, we can't even safely shut it down, let alone operate it." Her assistant, Dr. Morthek, was reviewing research data with growing despair. "Doctor, I've been analyzing our publication records for the past century. 87% of our breakthrough discoveries were either human-led research or built directly on human theoretical foundations. We've been riding on their scientific coattails without realizing it. The revelation was devastating. The Galactic Council had prided itself on its advanced scientific civilization, but the human departure was revealing that their technological progress had been an illusion. They'd been beneficiaries of human innovation, not partners in it. Back at Council headquarters, Chancellor Morvek sat in his private office, reviewing intelligence reports that painted an increasingly grim picture of galactic society's collapse. Food shortages were developing as agricultural systems failed. Medical facilities were closing their advanced treatment centers. Industrial output was plummeting. Transportation and communication networks were fragmenting. His aide, a young celestial named Lyra, entered with another batch of urgent reports. Chancellor, we've received formal requests for assistance from 47 member worlds. They're experiencing critical system failures and are requesting immediate intervention. What kind of assistance are they requesting? Morvek asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Human assistance, sir. They're specifically asking for human engineers, doctors, and technical specialists to be recalled to resolve their crises. Morvek let out a bitter laugh. And what have our diplomatic overtures to humanity accomplished? Lyra's expression became even more troubled. All communication attempts have been politely but firmly declined. The human governments have issued a joint statement saying they're focusing on their own development and have no interest in council affairs. They've also announced that they're implementing advanced defense systems around all human-controlled space. Any attempt at forced contact will be considered an act of aggression. The threat was clear and terrifying. Humanity hadn't just withdrawn from council space, they'd essentially declared independence from galactic civilization. And given their technological superiority, which was becoming more apparent every day, there was nothing the council could do about it. Sir, Lyra continued hesitantly, there's something else. Our intelligence services have detected massive energy signatures coming from human space. They appear to be constructing something enormous, but our sensors can't penetrate their new shielding technology to determine what it is. Morvek felt a chill run through his scales. The humans were building something in secret, using technology that the council couldn't even detect properly. The species they'd dismissed as junior partners were demonstrating capabilities that made the rest of the galaxy look primitive by comparison. A communication alert chimed on his desk. When he activated it, the face of Trade Commissioner Glax appeared, his normally jovial features twisted with panic. Chancellor, we have a critical situation. The Orion Trade Confederation is threatening to withdraw from the Council. They say they can't maintain their economy without human trade partnerships, and they're blaming us for driving humanity away. If they leave, it could trigger a complete collapse of our economic framework. Morvek closed his eyes. The Council was facing a cascade failure. As each system collapsed without human support, member species were beginning to question their allegiance to an organization that had clearly failed them. The humans hadn't just withdrawn their direct support. They'd revealed the fundamental weakness of a civilization built on their hidden contributions. How long do we have before complete collapse? Morvek asked quietly. Glax's expression grew even more grim. Based on current projections, sir, 6 months, maybe 8 if we're lucky. Unless we can convince the humans to return or somehow replace their contributions, we're looking at the end of galactic civilization as we know it. Morvek stared out the window at the bustling cityscape of Nexus Prime, knowing that this prosperity was about to become a memory. The Galactic Council had reached its peak under human contribution, and now they were about to learn what the galaxy looked like without the species they'd never properly appreciated. 6 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council was a shadow of its former self. What had once been a thriving civilization spanning thousands of worlds was now a collection of struggling societies desperately trying to maintain basic services. Ambassador Zethrix stood on the observation deck of what remained of Council headquarters, looking out at a city that told the story of their civilization's collapse. Half the buildings were dark, their human-designed power systems having failed weeks ago. The beautiful sky bridges that had connected the towers were closed after several collapsed without proper maintenance. The once bustling streets were nearly empty, as most species had recalled their representatives to deal with domestic crises. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was using a primitive telescope to observe the stars, while just months ago they'd had access to human quantum sensors that could detect individual spacecraft across entire star systems. Now they were reduced to squinting through optical devices like ancient civilizations. "Any sign of them?" asked a weary voice behind him. Zethrix turned to see Chancellor Morvek, though the Krellian leader was barely recognizable. His scales had lost their luster completely, and he moved with the slow gait of someone carrying tremendous weight. The past months had aged him decades. "Nothing," Zethrix replied. "Human space remains completely sealed. Our long-range scouts can't even get close enough to gather meaningful intelligence." The scouts that had attempted to approach human territory told disturbing stories. Massive defensive installations had appeared around human worlds seemingly overnight, protected by energy shields that made Council technology look like children's toys. Several probe ships had simply vanished when they got too close, their fate unknown. "The Valonians officially withdrew from the Council this morning," Morvek said quietly. "That makes 37 species who've left in the past month." Zethrix wasn't surprised. The Valonians had been one of the founding members of the Council, but their crystal-based technology had been completely dependent on human quantum harmonics. When those systems failed, their entire civilization had begun to fracture. They weren't the first proud species to abandon the Council in search of solutions elsewhere. "Have we heard anything from the others?" Zethrix asked. "The Saurians and Vorthai have formed a temporary alliance, trying to reverse-engineer human technology they still possess. The Chitauri Collective is attempting to contact other extragalactic civilizations for assistance. The Ethereal Assembly has retreated into meditation, claiming they're seeking spiritual solutions to technological problems." Morvek's voice carried the weight of complete defeat. The species that had once proudly led galactic civilization was now reduced to desperate improvisation. Every attempted solution only highlighted how dependent they'd become on human innovation. "Sir," came a voice from behind them. Aide Lyra approached with a communication tablet, her usually pristine appearance now disheveled from months of crisis management. "We've received a message from the Remnant Council members. They're requesting your presence for an emergency session." The emergency session was held in a much smaller chamber than the grand amphitheater they'd once used. Only 63 species remained in the Council, and many of those were represented by junior diplomats rather than their primary ambassadors. The air recycling system was failing, creating an unpleasant atmosphere that matched everyone's mood. Representative Thilla of the Chitauri Collective looked terrible. Her usually vibrant carapace was dull and cracked, and several of her limbs showed signs of the plague that had swept through her colonies without human medical intervention. She'd lost considerable weight, and her voice was barely a whisper. "My people are dying," she said simply. 40% of our population is gone. Our medical knowledge, built over millennia, proved useless against biological agents that human medicine could have stopped easily. Similar reports came from across the chamber. The Orion mining colonies had been abandoned after equipment failures made them uninhabitable. The Valonian crystal cities were going dark one by one as their quantum power systems failed. Agricultural worlds were experiencing mass starvation as terraforming equipment broke down. Dr. Zenhai from the Scientific Council presented the most disturbing report. We've been attempting to analyze human technology left in our research facilities. The more we study it, the more we realize how far beyond us they really were. Their quantum computers operate on principles we can't even identify. Their energy sources appear to violate our understanding of thermodynamics. Their medical nanobots use molecular engineering techniques that we can't replicate. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. We weren't partners in human research projects. We were students, and not particularly advanced ones. The humans were centuries ahead of us scientifically, but they shared their knowledge freely. We just never realized how much we were receiving. General Korthak of the Hegemony War Council, now looking far less imposing than before, added his own grim assessment. Our military analysis suggests that humanity could have conquered the entire galaxy whenever they chose. Their weapons technology, their defensive capabilities, their strategic thinking, they were so far superior that resistance would have been meaningless. They chose cooperation over conquest, and we repaid their generosity with contempt. The realization hit the chamber like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been advanced, they'd been overwhelmingly superior. They could have ruled the galaxy as conquerors, but instead, they'd chosen to share their knowledge and build a cooperative civilization. The Council hadn't just lost valuable allies, they'd lost benevolent protectors they'd never known they had. There's more. General Korthak continued grimly. Our intelligence suggests that other extragalactic civilizations have been monitoring our region. With humanity maintaining galactic stability, we were protected. Now that they've withdrawn, we're vulnerable to external threats we never knew existed. Ambassador Velix of the Ethereal Collective rose from her meditation position, her translucent form shimmering with distress. My people have attempted to contact human consciousness through transcendental means. What we've discovered is troubling. Humanity isn't just isolating themselves physically. They're ascending to something beyond our comprehension. What does that mean? Asked Chancellor Morvek. The energy signatures coming from human space aren't just construction projects, Velix explained. They're transformation signatures. Humanity is evolving, possibly into a form of existence we cannot even conceive. While we've been struggling to maintain what they gave us, they've been advancing beyond the need for material civilization entirely. The implications were staggering. Not only had they lost humanity's support, but humanity was advancing beyond the point where they could ever provide that support again. The window of opportunity for reconciliation was closing, possibly forever. We need to try one more time, declared Trade Commissioner Glax desperately. Send a formal delegation, acknowledge our mistakes, offer them anything they want. Full council leadership, exclusive trading rights, territorial concessions, anything. It won't work, said a new voice from the chamber entrance. Everyone turned to see Dr. Sarah Chen's former aide, Dr. Marcus Webb, one of the few humans who had remained behind to help with transition protocols. The human looked exhausted and sad as he approached the assembly. I've been in contact with Earth's leadership. They're not interested in negotiations. They've moved beyond the need for what the Council can offer. Then what do they want? Pleaded Representative Thilla. Dr. Webb's expression grew even more sorrowful. Nothing from us. They've learned that they can achieve far more alone than they ever could working with species who see them as useful tools rather than true partners. They're building something magnificent, but they're building it without us. Dr. Webb, Chancellor Morvek said formally, will humanity ever return? The human scientist considered the question for a long moment. Maybe in a few thousand years, when you've developed enough to be true equals rather than dependents. Humanity doesn't abandon civilizations forever, but they won't participate in relationships based on exploitation and disrespect. But we'll be extinct by then, whispered Representative Thilla. Perhaps, Dr. Webb said gently. Or perhaps you'll finally learn to build something sustainable on your own. That choice is yours now. As Dr. Webb left the chamber, the assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. The truth was finally clear. Humanity hadn't just been valuable allies. They'd been the foundation holding galactic civilization together. Their departure wasn't just a diplomatic crisis, it was an evolutionary test. The Council would either learn to build a truly cooperative civilization worthy of eventual partnership with an ascended humanity, or they would join the countless other civilizations that had failed to evolve beyond their primitive instincts. Looking out at the darkening city beyond the chamber walls, Chancellor Morvek realized that their greatest regret wasn't losing humanity's support. It was the knowledge that they'd had the opportunity to join humanity on their incredible journey, and they'd thrown it away through their own arrogance and blindness. Humanity's departure wasn't just the end of one era, it was a lesson written in the collapse of civilizations. The galaxy would remember this moment as the day they learned the difference between being useful to someone and being valued by them. And somewhere in the depths of space, humanity continued their amazing transformation, carrying with them the knowledge of what the galaxy might have become if its people had chosen wisdom over pride.